Why is rent vesting on the rise? Rent vesting is basically you have some money in your bank account and you decide that I'd rather put that money to buy an investment property for a rental return as opposed to using that money to buy your own property. And that is actually something I've done personally nearly about 17 years ago to kickstart my property portfolio and property goals. So if I share my story, in my mid-20s, I was offered a brand new apartment in Balmain in Sydney for, I think it was a 1-bedroom apartment for $550,000. And I was working at a major bank at that point, got a loan to be able to buy that. So I could have bought that for my own self. The second option that I was looking at was buying an investment property out in the western suburbs of Sydney back then, in which the houses were about $190,000. I chose the second option. It does not mean that the first option was not a good option. The reason I chose to rent vest, it's not because of the area, but it's more about the debt level I was carrying. So that property back then in Western Sydney was $180,000. With a 10% deposit, that was $18,000. And the rent at that point in time was about $330 to $350 a week, which means it's extremely positive cash flow. More importantly, the secondary benefits to me, and I put that all in one category, are the taxation benefits. The moment you own your own home, it's your income, and it's usually post-tax income that is paying for it. Whereas when you own an investment property and you own sufficient investment properties, you can use pre-tax money with a great accountant to pay for that property. So what I would do is when I get a tax refund, because I was working a full-time job, I'd use that as a deposit to go buy the next property. And over those years, those houses in Western Sydney that were $180,000 are probably now close to $900,000, has tripled in value because I picked great areas, but they remain positive in cash flow. Eventually, you could, if you want to, sell those properties down and buy your own home. But when you do buy your own home, you're buying with less debt. So that's my view, and I think thanks to social media and education, I look at starting DDP 14 years ago where it was not that big, is that more and more people are becoming educated that the culture of having to own your own home does not have to be the only way. And the younger generations have seen probably their parents go through that and maybe not enjoy that process of owning quote unquote a 30-year debt, because it is a debt and it's the bank's asset. So that's my take on why more and more people are getting into rent vesting. They're becoming more educated that there is another path, and there is another path. For anyone who says, well, that was good for you, Zaki, back then for $180,000 properties in Sydney, that's just not going to happen today. But the only reason I looked at $180,000 properties in Sydney is not because it was Sydney, it's because where I could afford to buy a good land size with great rent in an area that's going to grow. So now running DDP in 2025, we still find properties for our clients for around $200,000 upwards. No different to my properties in Western Sydney, because the philosophy and the strategy has still been based on what I achieved success, and it has continuously been achieved for our clients over the last 14 years, that you can still buy properties for $200,000, same as my Western Sydney properties, great land site, great rent, and hold for the long term and build up that equity, and eventually you'll have options either to sell and buy a home that you really want to live in with less debt.